Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show. I am your host, Dr. Will, and as I mentioned earlier this morning with Carly Stigler, we are doing a three-part series on the do's and don'ts of professional development. Right now, I'm here with Ibrahim Baig from Canada. How are you doing, Ibrahim?
I'm doing great, Dr. Will. How you doing?
Doing quite well. Thanks for asking. For those individuals who are watching this show, and they may be wondering uh, who you are. Would you please introduce yourself?
Sorry, I think, Dr. Will, I think there's something happening in the background. Here's some background audio.
Yeah, do you? Uh,
Oh, sorry, one second. I had sorry, I just had the YouTube page open, so I was just playing in the
okay,
background here.
all right,
Yeah, so sorry, you might just want to have to repeat that question there.
all righty. So for those individuals who are watching the show
Yes.
and they are saying to themselves, "Who is Ibrahim?" Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So, pretty much right now, I'm a current PhD student at the University of Toronto. So I'm a passionate educator. The focus of what I'm currently doing is curriculum studies and teacher development. And right now, my dissertation focus is leaning towards teaching and learning in the 21st century, and more specifically, improving teaching practices and having teachers understand their integration and use of educational technology in our current context. So that's who I am. What I currently do alongside that is I'm currently a high school teacher at a private school, and I'm also the educational technology coordinator at the school. So we've pretty much we're using Google Chromebooks, we use Google Apps, we have a one-to-one program that I was able to adopt and launch at the school. So right now, yeah, it's a lot of Google, it's a lot of technology, and I'm really just trying to take a lot of theory and apply it into practice.
Excellent, excellent. Let's just get right into it. So, whether it's Google related or PD designed and delivered via your work, you have a varied background in delivering professional development. So, when you hear the words professional development, what do they mean to you?
So just for myself, I've been doing professional development for about the past year or so. So I've done a different context. So even at my current school, for having done it over the past year, and even actually I'm beginning to consult for various other schools about Google Apps for Education. The one thing that I find really important for what I'm doing in professional development is building high quality programs that always go back to student outcomes. So for me, because the primary focus of my PDs is that I'm working with teachers, for them, I feel there's an inherent need for them to know that what we're working on today is going to tie back to their students and improving their achievement and their engagement and so on and so forth. So when having them involved in the process as well, so usually before my professional development, one thing that I really found beneficial was kind of sending out a survey or even just sending out an email asking them what they were looking for, some ideas, some thoughts beforehand. So I just want to run things by them as opposed to imposing ideas on top of them. So bearing that in mind, so what it means to me pretty much is just giving them some meaning to what they do. So even if it means that at their school, so at my current school, what I try to do at other schools is that because I know there's a vision for what they're doing, I try to give them things that they can embed into their job. So there's a direct turnaround, and they can implement it directly. Um, and pretty much aside from that, I always like to just have a vision of my professional development. So have this backwards design model where I have a vision, a goal, and I work backwards from there. So whether that means I'm planning myself or I'm planning with the teachers, I know that my PDs need to have a goal, and I pretty much go with that.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on either district or school led PD, and how do you make it interesting when you are the one actually delivering the PD?
Okay, it's actually a great question, Dr. Will. So
Thank
the first part of the question there. So my thoughts on a district-led PD. So as you know, scalability is one of the biggest things with education. So how do you take an idea from the classroom and let's say from a school, and now you're talking district-wide. So there's a lot of things involved. So just from some of my readings and some of my understandings of the context, we're actually seeing that happen right now in the case of Google. So I believe it was 2 weekends ago was the case where Google had a on-air conference, and you can see where scalability is happening now, but the question is, how is it happening? And you can see technology is one of the factors. It's the change, it's the medium that's allowing for this change to occur. So my thoughts on district-led PD would be that because there's so many people involved in this particular area, and I mean for the most part because they're a part of a specific district, what I would normally do is you would take the vision of this district and focus on that. So whether you're using technology, whether you're speaking in person, I think to again go back to what I was saying in the first point is that you tie everything back into what they're doing on their day-to-day basis, whether it's a school improvement plan, a district improvement plan. There should be some sort of tied based back right into that. Um, so yeah, then how do you make it interesting when you're delivering the PD? So the thing is right now because I mean interesting is it's a really subjective thing where like interesting for me could be interesting for somebody else that's really different. So one thing I would definitely consider, and this is actually just research informed, so it's kind of one of the studies I looked at during one of my PhD classes about improving teaching. So one of the articles mentioned by Gusky was that they mentioned that some of the key elements of effective professional development might include having outside experts. So especially in the case of a district-led PD, if there's a particular individual who might be consistently, I guess, conducting these sessions, maybe having somebody else parallel the session with them. Even time as well. How much time are these sessions taking up? Are the length of the sessions too long? Are they too short? Those would be considerations. Following up, I think, is really huge, and that's something I try to do as well in my particular context. And I think at a district level, it's really important, so they don't feel as if they're just showing up and they receive all this information and there's no real input. So I think feedback, especially with whether it's Google Forms or whatever other medium, is important. If possible, for a district-led PD, I think activities would be really, really important. Whether that means you have breakout sessions where the individuals go into different groups, or you have a huge integrative session using technology somehow, I think that activity would have some really, really good purpose. And then lastly, content. So I think with content, and then again, it goes back to because they're all part of this district, there is a, I guess, overarching vision or goal or mission. And I think if you can continue to reiterate that and to kind of focus on that, it just gives them a bit more purpose and function for what they're currently doing. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Okay, so I have been in that zone where you know you're bringing the house down. Take me back to one of your experiences and what made that training different from some of the others that you delivered.
That's a pretty interesting question. So I mean, again, having done this for about a year now, I mean, there's been a few instances where you feel it, like you said, you're in the zone. There's a vibe in the air, and what I would say is like I think going into that session, that PD session, I knew my content well. Like I knew what I was talking about. I didn't just know it in theory, I knew it in practice. So I was really experienced in it. And because of that, you could tell the passion kind of just comes out in my words, right? So I'm not speaking from a very surface level. I have a deeper understanding, and when your audience can feel that authenticity, I think it's really important. So in addition to that, I think because I was in the zone, I think it's more along the lines of I knew my context. I knew who my audience was. I knew what their expert level was or their novice level was in terms of particular areas, so I was able to cater what I was talking about to particular areas. So I wasn't using jargon that wasn't relative to them. I wasn't using examples that might fly over their head. So understanding context really, really helped me out for that experience. And for that one experience, I just, you know what, I remember using a lot of examples, and you can kind of just see the heads beginning to nod, because when you're using examples and they see that you're an individual who's been on the same kind of battlegrounds they have, and they've been in the classroom, they've been experiencing this stuff, I think that's when you really begin to, I guess, resonate with your audience. And for me, just taking that theory aspect, context into consideration, and knowing your content, bundling that all together and just really kind of using that as an example was something I think I would continue to try to do in the future. So, I mean, I can say for the past year or so has been really beneficial for me.
Okay, so now let's look at what it's sort of like, one and done or drive-by trainings, I like to call.
Okay.
So when you're in front of a group of teachers, how do you account for the various skill sets, learning styles, and professional development needs of teachers? And is there a method or approach that guides you?
It's really, really good question. So how would I account for the various skill sets? So I think it's almost like being in a classroom. You have adult learners there with you. So one thing, again, like I just spoke about previously, is again just trying to understand content and who my audience is. So accounting for that, obviously, we talk about this term in teaching, differentiated instruction, and I think to some degree that should be a consideration in professional development. So again, just trying to understand who my audience is, right? So going into a new school, going into a district, I mean, you definitely need some context in terms of the length of the program, in terms of its operation, the skill set of the different audience members, and then you can kind of gauge it from there. Um, so is there a particular method that guides my approach? So as I spoke about earlier, I think activities have been beneficial. So I think with activities, whether you're a novice or whether you're an expert, I think there's something about an activity that can resonate with everybody. And even if you're an expert, then you can usually spin off of that activity. And if you're new at it, then it's pretty much you get to absorb it and kind of understand it. So, and then lastly, what I would say is just giving them real examples, right? So that might go back to activities, but taking these theoretical understandings, all this content that's out there, and just giving them something that's direct. Because especially today in educational technology, a lot of buzzwords are being used. Everything sounds great, but the question I've been asked multiple times is, okay, this sounds great, it looks amazing, but how does this actually work in the classroom? And this is where I think the approach about giving them tangible examples about particular subject areas this is being used at and the outcomes of it have been, I would say, definitely the most beneficial, and the way I would definitely account for various skill sets in the audience.
Excellent, excellent. So, what would you say is the most important trait or traits needed for an instructional technologist?
So for an instructional technologist, I think, if I would keep it short and sweet, what I would say is just believe in what you do. When you believe in what you do, the passion comes out, and when you believe in what you do, you're gonna learn about it, you're gonna know about it, you're gonna read about it. You're gonna do everything in your power to be the best at what you're gonna be at. So I think with that in mind, you can kind of work with this mantra or this model where you really believe in what you're doing, and it's not just, let's say, a job per se, but it's an actual lifestyle. Then I think the authenticity, the sincerity comes out, and it's really something that we need in education, and particularly in this part in instructional technology, where things are flying by so fast. But if we can just be authentic of what we're doing and sincere, I think believing in what you do has definitely worked for me, and I think that would be the advice I'd definitely hand off.
Okay, so now this question is of particular interest to me. I mean, this happens to be an issue that I am actually struggling with. I mean, I can take you back to the last conference I presented at, and I was there. I was going through the motions. I didn't feel it. I mean, when you do what we do, or you deliver PD in general, and I guess the same thing could be for a teacher who's in the classroom and has to teach close reading or grammar for the upteenth time. And you get to a point to where it's like, oh, it's the same stuff, it's the same stuff. How do you keep your sessions fresh? How do you keep exciting? How do you still keep your enthusiasm after giving a training, for the 200th or whatever time?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, again, I'm not as experienced as you, and I think it's probably eventually gonna get to me soon. But for my particular situation, I've probably done, like you're talking about, let's say Google Drive. I've done Google Apps about even like 8 or 9 times, 10 times now, and I know exactly what you're talking about. You get to this kind of mundane phase where you feel like, okay, you know what? I know this so well. It's so elementary, How do I spice it up? So this is actually something what I would probably do, and this is something I need to try more often is maybe you know what, giving your audience listen. I mean, the thing about Google that's great is that there's new features coming out every single time. So if you can maybe, as a professional developer or as a trainer, just try to learn one thing that's new, whether it's one setting, one option, and just try to, that way it keeps it fresh for you and inherently keeps it fresh for them, even though they probably won't know. But I think by you challenging yourself and maybe trying something that's out of the ordinary to add to it that wouldn't have been there in the previous session that you did, let's say a week ago, kind of, gives you something to kind of like, almost kind of be on your toes about. That, hey, you know what, I got to be ready for this because it's new to me, and therefore I think like you're mentioning, it might keep it fresh for you, and therefore hopefully kind of add that new aspect to it. So again, the thing is for myself, I'm not there yet, so maybe in year two I might feel this a bit more when I have my new staff coming in and stuff. But I think this is a great question. I mean, I'd love to hear what the more experienced PD trainers would have to say about this. I'd love to really hear what they do. The only other thing I could imagine is that maybe at your initial PD, depending on what you're doing, maybe not let out everything out of the hat. Maybe just kind of giving out a couple of tips from there, and then that way you pull back, so at least you know for next time, okay, you know what, I only gave them just the hook, and you kind of go from there. So I'd love to hear, yeah, what other people have to say about this, and yeah, that'd be cool.
And other folks, drop some feedback either on YouTube or my blog about that. The only thing that made Google Drive sort of fresh again for me was delivering it to smaller groups. But in a large setting as a conference, I was like, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm retiring these Google tools because I've just done them year after year after year, and it's like, okay, I'm done. But going back in my district, where we actually have a booking site where teachers or teams can book myself or the other instructional technologists for different trainings at different times. When I was able to work with one teacher, two teachers, three teachers, it was a much more intimate setting, and we had a blast, and it was really fun time for me. But when I'm in a room, 30, 40 people, the thrill was gone, and I was just like, again. So, and I need to. Well, I'm going to take a different angle because I'm actually presenting at Google Drive at this conference next month, where I could honestly get 70 people in a room. So I got to try something different, like you said, try a different angle or something to sort of keep it fresh. Now, before we go, this is one last question, because I always ask people about their advice. And I know quite a few people who think, you got a cool job, and I would like to do your job. And so my question to you is, what is your advice to others whose job is to deliver professional development, and what are actually your do's and don'ts?
All right, it's a good question. So my advice about do's and don'ts. So again, this has just been some advice that has been passed down to me. Some stuff I would say maybe I've been learning myself as well. So one thing I think for sure is just expectations. And what I mean by expectations is that, because you're the expert, unquote, about what you're doing, and you're so passionate about it, what I would definitely say this is to somebody else doing a PD, that your audience often is coming in with a blank slate. They don't know about your topic the same way you do. So don't expect them to pick it up right away and be able to implement it the day after. And I think so don't have high expectations, quote unquote, initially, but I think you obviously want to challenge them, but you don't want to expect that, okay, you know what, I taught them something and there isn't a quick turnaround. I think that would definitely be a don't, in my opinion. So don't have high expectations, do what you got to do, see how it goes, but kind of like, what you have to do, and don't hope for, change, because change is a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Be a colleague. That'd be my second thing, is kind of be ready to work with them. With that comes also like don't speak to them. So often it's even just a matter of language. So often we might say like you guys have to work on this. What I usually say is like we as teachers or we as educators, and just kind of showing the language, because the way I see it is we're all in it together. So just language is important, especially when you're training, because you don't want to give this impression that there's some sort of hierarchy or I know it, you don't know it. At the end of the day, we're all learning. So I think talking down or kind of being a colleague is really important, especially with the way in the words that you use. Structure is definitely a do. You gotta have structure in what you're doing, even if that means for you having an agenda. So using an agenda for your PDs, like knowing that what these are going to be my topics. I'm going to keep it short and simple, and I'm going to hit those points home, and you kind of just call it a day. And that kind of goes on to my next point is a don't would be know when to stop. So the thing is sometimes because we're experts in what we do, we have a lot of knowledge about so many options and features and so on and so forth. We'd love to kind of go with it, but I think we have to know when to pull back, and that kind of goes in with the structure as well. So when you go into, let's say, even a session about Gmail, which might be really basic to you, know what points you want to hit home and pretty much call it a day from there. And I think that's really important. And keeping it concise is really important, right? So just kind of knowing when to stop and being open. So being open to questions, being flexible. And again, I think when you build this collegial environment where they see that, hey, you know what? This is like a we and us type of environment, I think you're going to feel the room become more of a collegial community, like a professional learning community, they would say, or professional learning network, where everybody's on the same team. And at the end of the day, for professional development, I mean, we are trying to improve teaching, but the end goal at the end of the day is really student outcomes. And I think effective professional development should always, always, always have student learning outcomes as the end goal. And I think when that's pretty much the structure of everything that we're doing, at the end of the day, we're all educators to help students and kids grow and become something special. So that would be my my advice there for do's and don'ts.
Awesome, awesome. Ibrahim, thank you very much. This was an awesome show, and you provided some great insights and information for our viewers. So, folks, thank you again for watching another episode of the Dr. Will Show. To be able to get in contact with Ibrahim, as usual, it will be on my blog, and this will be tweeted out to folks. And coming up next in about an hour, I will be with Kerry Gallagher talking about PD from the perspective of a veteran teacher. Thank you, people, for watching the show. Thank you, Ibrahim, for being a guest.
Thank you.
All right, people, and always, be you, EDU.